Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we have a file on the table that is, well, in the most literal sense possible, it's a trap.
Oh, is absolutely a trap. And the author is actually brazen enough to just admit it right there in the very first sentence,
Right, because we are talking about a piece of writing, a chapter titled simply Boobies.
which is, I mean, it's a title that does a whole lot of heavy lifting. It's a single word, but it conjures up a very specific image for a very specific demographic.
And the author, who is writing from the perspective of a straight male, he just calls himself out immediately. He actually says something like, I chose this title specifically to attract the attention of straight men and lesbians.
Yeah, he knows exactly what he's doing. He is banking on that instant lizard brain click response from the reader.
But then comes the rug pull, the classic bait and switch. He promises to tell you absolutely everything there is to know about boobies, but he issues this warning right at the top. He is not going to mention a single human woman.
Which I'm sure might leave a few readers pretty disappointed. But for us, for this deep dive, that is exactly where it gets interesting. Because instead of anatomy, we get ornithology. We get the blue-footed booby.
But we should be clear right off the bat here for you listening. This isn't a nature documentary. We aren't here just to learn fun facts about seabirds.
Yeah.
The bird is basically a mirror.
Exactly. This source material, which is chapter 35 of a larger work, is actually this wild comparative study.
It's a, what does he call it? A scientific safari.
Very scientific safari, right. The mission here is to take the mating rituals of the blue-footed booby and overlay them, literally point for point, onto the social behaviors of gay men cruising at Baker Beach in San Francisco.
It really sounds like the setup for a bad sketch comedy bit. You know, a bird and a guy walk onto a beach.
It does.
But as you read through it, you realize he's doing something much smarter than just making cheap jokes. He's using this total absurdity to tackle some incredibly heavy topics. We're talking biology, the nature of sexual attraction, and that age-old debate of choice.
And that is the brilliance of the satire here. By adopting this persona of an unfunded anthropologist, and he keeps reminding us of that, right?
Sure.
He has no PhD, no grant money. He's just a guy with a car and a notebook.
Just a broke fiction writer.
Exactly. By doing that, he strips away all the political correctness and the heavy social nuance we usually bring to these topics. He just looks at human behavior as if we were any other species of bird.
He completely levels the playing field. Humans aren't special. We're just lacking.
We're just liking. And that brings us perfectly to the first big concept we need to unpack. We really have to understand the biology before we can understand the men on the beach.
So let's open up section 1 here, the biology of the blue-footed booby. The author introduces this term, lekking. Now, I've heard this term in nature shows before, but how does he define it for the reader?
Well, if you look at a textbook, the definition is an aggregation of males gathering to engage in competitive displays. But the author gives us the translation we actually need. He calls it biologies for strutting your stuff for the babes.
Which is really all it is when you think about it. It's the club on a Friday night. It's the high school prom. It's just the universal dance.
Right, and for the blue-footed booby, this dance is entirely centered around architecture. They are builders. The text compares them to bowerbirds. They construct these elaborate nests out of sand.
But they aren't building houses, right? Like, this isn't for keeping the rain off or actually living in.
No, and that's a crucial distinction he makes. He notes that these nests have absolutely no structural purpose for shelter initially. They are purely aesthetic. They are built for no other purpose than to impress mates.
It's a status symbol. It's a prop.
It is the ultimate bachelor pad. It's a love pad, to use the text's phrasing. And there is a detail here that I just find so funny and so telling about biology. The author notes the life cycle of this nest. Once the deed is done.
Once they've mated.
Right. Once sex has occurred, what do you think happens to the pad?
I mean, they don't keep it.
They tear it down.
Yeah.
They literally destroy the love pad to build something more appropriate for children.
That is hilariously relatable. It's exactly like the guy who immediately sells his sports car and buys a sensible minivan the second the pregnancy test comes back positive.
It's precisely that. It highlights that the whole lekking phase is just a performance. It's a temporary state of being designed to achieve a very specific goal.
Mhm.
And once the goal is achieved, the props are discarded.
Okay, so we have the stage set, we have the sand nest, now we need the script. The text breaks down the booby courtship protocol into these very rigid, very specific steps.
Because biology loves a protocol. It is not jazz, it's classical music. Everyone has a specific part to play.
Right. So step one, we have the cruiser.
Yes, you have a bird flying past the nest. This is the cruiser. He is actively scanning the landscape, looking for a potential host.
And step two involves the host, who is the owner of the nest.
Right, so if the host looks interested,
Uh-huh.
and the text implies this is a very subtle visual cue, the cruiser initiates the landing sequence. And this is the moment we've been waiting for, the big title drop.
He flashes the feet.
He flashes his bright blue feet. It's the calling card. It's the ultimate visual signal that says, hey, I am healthy, I am vibrant, look at my genetic fitness.
But just showing up and showing your shoes isn't enough. You have to close the deal. So if the interest from the host continues, we move to step three, which is the display.
The sky pointing. The cruiser takes his beak and points it straight up to the sky. He spreads his wings incredibly wide. He puffs out his chest.
It's a total power pose. He's making himself as large and vertical as physically possible.
And then comes the audio component. He whistles.
So just to visualize this, beak up, wings out, chest puffed out, whistle. It's a very theatrical routine.
Highly theatrical. And the host has a scripted response to this as well. If the host accepts the suit, they bury their beak in the plumage.
Which sounds incredibly intimate.
It really is. It's the definitive signal of consent in this protocol. Then they climb into the nest together. The text explicitly describes groaning and whistling ensuing from the nest. And, just to be scientifically precise here...
Because he's an anthropologist, of course.
Right, and perhaps to set up the comparison later, the author notes that the mating is done mostly from behind.
Okay, so that is our baseline. That is nature operating purely on autopilot. Beak, wings, whistle, nest.
Exactly. And this is where the actual safari begins. The author takes this biological template, this rigid script, and he goes and packs his car.
I love the description of him packing the car. He says he loaded it with scientific instruments.
Which, considering we already established he's a fiction writer with absolutely no funding, we can safely assume means a spiral notebook, maybe some binoculars, and a sandwich.
Right. And he drives 5 miles to Baker Beach in San Francisco. Now, if you don't know the area, Baker Beach has a very specific reputation. It's a gorgeous spot, but it's also famous for its nude sunbathing areas and specifically as a well-known cruising ground for gay men.
But notice how the author doesn't describe it as a cruising ground initially. He describes it entirely through his booby lens. He says the beach is honeycombed with these unique sand fortresses.
He's seeing the architecture. He looks at these windbreakers, you know, guys digging pits in the sand to block the cold ocean wind, and he sees the exact equivalent of the booby nests.
He posits this parallel hypothesis.
Mm.
He suggests that gay men, much like the bowerbirds and the boobies, are a lekking species. They are out there building these nests for the sole purpose of attracting mates.
And he decides to test this hypothesis by actively observing the ritual. And it's actually startling how perfectly he maps the bird behavior onto the human behavior.
It's almost a direct one-to-one overlay. Let's look at the human ritual he identifies.
Let's break it down. Step one, the cruise.
Right, so in the bird world, they fly over. At Baker Beach, the cruise begins up in the parking lot or on the road. The text says the human cruiser initiates the ritual by flashing some body part from his car.
And the author adds a very dry, very funny parenthetical note here. He writes, it is usually not his feet.
Which is a crucial biological distinction. The anatomy is obviously changed, but the intent, that initial signal of availability, is completely identical.
Okay, so the flash happens. Then we move to step two, the approach.
If the host sitting down in the sand fort seems interested, the cruiser approaches for a closer inspection. And this is the moment the author finds the most striking. Just before entering the nest, the human cruiser performs a display that mirrors the bird almost exactly.
The bird points his beak to the sky. The man.
According to the text, the man points his penis toward the sky.
And thrusts out his chest.
It's the exact same geometry. It's the same biological assertion of physical presence. The sky pointing is universal, apparently.
And what about the audio? We know the bird's whistle.
Here, we actually see a slight reversal in the protocol. In the bird world, the cruiser whistles to announce himself. In the human version at Baker Beach, it's the host who whistles.
Ah, so it's the invitation, like step into my office.
Exactly. And then comes the acceptance. They enter the sand nest together. The text describes groaning and giggling, though he makes sure to note there is no more whistling once they're inside.
It's really funny, but it's also weirdly normalizing, isn't it? By completely stripping away the social context, by ignoring the fact that society calls this cruising or illicit or counterculture and just describing the raw mechanics, he makes it seem like just another standard biological function.
That is the true power of the anthropological lens he's using. He isn't judging the morality of it. He's just observing the species. He's essentially saying, look, humans do this too. We have our scripts. We have our mating dances.
But there is a pretty major flaw in his methodology here. The problem with observing humans is that, unlike the boobies, humans actually notice when you are staring at them.
That is the inherent danger of the safari. The author admits he crept closer out of scientific curiosity. He wanted to see the data points up close.
But he totally forgot he's also a male of the species.
Right. He's wearing a literal safari hat. He thinks that hat acts like an invisibility cloak, marking him strictly as an observer, a neutral third party. He even asks in the text, didn't my safari hat give them any hints?
But to the men hanging out at Baker Beach, a hat is just a hat. Or, maybe a prop. Maybe it's part of a role play scenario for them.
Exactly. The specimens began displaying their courtship rituals directly at the author. He immediately stopped being the scientist and became the target of the cruiser.
This is where the comedy of the chapter really peaks for me, because his initial reaction isn't fear, it's just pure annoyance. He's thinking, I'm working here, I'm doing science, can't you see the notebook?
But then, and this is great, he admits something very honest. He says he was actually flattered.
He says, so many gentlemen callers before had never so flamboyantly courted me.
It's a genuine moment of vulnerability. Because even if the attention isn't from the demographic you are personally targeting, the sheer effort of the display, the fact that someone is out there sky-pointing just for you, is a massive ego boost.
It validates his own value as a mate, even if he's in completely the wrong market. But he knows he can't follow through. He has to decline the offer.
And this leads to what we can call the field assimilation. He tries to communicate no thank you to these men in the only language he's been studying all day.
It's a bird language.
The female booby wiggle.
I really want you, the listener, to vividly visualize this moment. This is a grown man. He's straight. He's wearing a literal safari hat. He's standing on a nude beach in San Francisco. And the text says he fluffed his feathers and waddled his haunches.
He is physically waddling in the sand. He genuinely thinks this signals, I am submissive, but not interested, or perhaps he just thinks it's generic bird behavior. He's trying to communicate, I am just a bird, leave me be.
But the result is just immediate social death.
The text says the courtship calls came to an abrupt end.
It's a total record scratch moment.
Because he broke the immersion. He signaled that he wasn't just playing hard to get, but that he was fundamentally other. He wasn't a fellow cruiser. He was just some weirdo waddling on the beach.
So the mating ritual utterly fails. He's alone again. And the scene shifts. The sun goes down, or the mood changes, and we move to the post-mating social scene.
Right, they migrate up to the parking lot. The men abandon the sand nests. The utilitarian structure served its purpose and is left behind. And this is where the text introduces the females of the species.
Meaning the straight women who like to hang out with the gay men?
Exactly. And the author tries to reintegrate into human society. He takes off the anthropologist mask and just wants to be a regular guy hanging out. He wants to join the witty banter.
But he's completely shut out.
He is. He notes that the women are far, far more interested in the gay men. He actually calls the gay men wit wizards.
Wit wizards, and he adds a very bitter damn them.
And how do the gay men react to him? They've completely shut down. He notes that his previous spying on the beach, his weird behavior, the waddling, has made them taciturn. They are quiet. They're actively guarding the social circle against the outsider.
So he's excluded from the sex on the beach, and now he's excluded from the social circle in the parking lot. He's completely isolated. And this isolation forces him to really think. He starts analyzing the men he's been watching with a much more critical eye.
Which brings us to the conclusion of his study, or at least the first part of it. He lists their attributes, and he is genuinely bewildered by what he is seeing.
Right, he lists them out like a sports stat sheet. He says they have the body of Rock Hudson, the wardrobe of Elton John, the hygiene of Liberace, the wit of Oscar Wilde.
That is an incredibly potent toolkit for a man to have.
And he says that possessing these specific gifts and having dozens of adoring women fans just flocking around them and not using them to coax those women into bed seems criminally insane.
Criminally insane. That's his exact phrase. He's thinking entirely about utility. He's looking at it and thinking, if I had that body, if I had that wit, if my hygiene was that impeccable, I would be unstoppable with women.
He even adds, to say nothing of having sex in sand. Which, frankly, is a very fair point. Sand is terrible.
It is the absolute enemy of friction. But this confusion he has, this claim of insanity, is actually the bridge to the really serious part of the text, because it highlights a fundamental truth. This isn't a strategy. It isn't a choice.
Right, because if it were a logical calculation, the math just doesn't add up for a straight man. He would take the Rock Hudson body and go completely dominate the straight dating market.
Exactly. If it were truly a menu option, why would you choose to ignore the women who are literally throwing themselves at you? Why would you choose the path of most social resistance?
And this realization allows him to deconstruct a phrase we hear all the time in society, the idea that homosexuality is a choice.
He flips that argument completely on its head. He argues that when people claim homosexuality is a choice, what they're really saying, what they are actually revealing about their own internal psychology is that they themselves have homosexual feelings that they are actively choosing to ignore.
Right, because if you don't have the feelings to begin with, there is no choice to make. You aren't waking up every morning, looking in the mirror and deciding, nope, not today, Brad Pitt.
Exactly. It's pure projection. And to prove this theory, he looks at his own life to prove the negative. He says, I certainly didn't experience my own heterosexuality as a choice.
Which brings us to the Susie Plimpton story. And I love this section so much because it grounds this lofty psychological theory in a very specific, very visceral childhood memory.
We go all the way back to the sandbox. He's a young boy. He's playing with his toy trucks.
Because trucks are safe, trucks are neutral, trucks definitely don't have feelings or cooties.
And then Susie Plimpton walks by. Now, we have to establish the social context here. In the rigid hierarchy of his age group, Susie is the enemy. She is fully cootie infested.
All of his logic tells him to run away. The social pressure of his peer group tells him to hate her. If he goes over and talks to her, he instantly loses status with all the other boys.
But biology just overrides everything. His reaction isn't a thought process. It isn't a choice. It's just a sound. He says, woohoo.
He says, yet for no logical reason I could see, suddenly I really, really, really wanted to touch her.
And the internal conflict he describes here is actually quite profound. He asks himself, what was wrong with me? Did I want cooties?
This is what he calls the shameful secret. And it's fascinating because usually when we talk about the shame and confusion of sexual awakening, we talk about it in the context of queer youth. But he's arguing here that all sexual awakening, even straight awakening, feels like a betrayal of the childhood self.
He honestly thought that only sissies felt this way, this sudden, intense desire to be near girls. He thought the spontaneous gymnastics of his penis were an actual medical condition that needed treating. He thought he was broken.
He fought it. He really didn't want to change. But finally, he had to just admit defeat to biology. He had to, in his words, come out to himself as a heterosexual.
Because it wasn't a choice. It was a biological compulsion that went completely against his social standing as a dedicated girl hater.
And to really drive this point home, the massive distinction between liking someone socially and wanting them sexually, he introduces another childhood character, Billy.
Billy the snot shooter.
We really have to talk about Billy's specific skill set because the text is very detailed about this.
Billy was the absolute apex predator of the playground. He had an unparalleled talent for snot shots, which means spitting up high in the air and catching it back in his mouth.
Which is deeply grotesque.
But to a young boy, incredibly impressive. The author admired this so much. He tried desperately to emulate it. He says he just couldn't achieve loogie cohesion.
Loogie cohesion.
He just ended up getting spit shrapnel all over his own face.
But the point isn't the spit itself. The point is the deep admiration he felt.
Exactly. The author deeply admired Billy. He wanted to be exactly like Billy. He wanted to hang out with Billy all the time. He explicitly says Billy was clearly a character worth emulating.
What?
But he did not want to touch him.
And that is a hard biological line.
That is the foundation of his cooties theory of orientation. He realized that the quest to nauseate girls was completely wrong. The boys were the ones who actually had the cooties.
He realizes we were the ones who had cooties.
And he translates this perfectly into adult terms. He says, now, I'm a grown-up. Men universally have cooties.
It's his baseline definition of his own straightness. He says if a buddy's knee accidentally touches him under the table at a bar, he gets a reaction just like a girl in second grade touched him. Eee.
It's an involuntary physical recoil. It's not a moral judgment on his friend. It's not a political stand. It's a biological reflex. And he defines heterosexuality so beautifully in this specific context.
Yeah.
Whatever the opposite of cooties is, women have that. They have reverse cooties.
Reverse cooties, it's magnetic.
It's a fundamental force of nature. You don't choose the magnet. You don't get to choose which pole violently attracts you and which one repels you.
Now, this theory, a cooties theory, it actually explains a lot of the aggression we see out in the real world. And the author touches on this in section 6. He brings up Jerry Springer.
Ah, yes. The ultimate anthropological field study for the 90s and early 2000s.
Right. And just to be clear for you listening, we're sharing the author's analysis here as a piece of his argument. We're not endorsing the political or cultural framing of daytime TV. We're just looking at how he applies his theory to it.
Exactly. We're just looking at his data. So he describes watching this specific episode of Springer. There's a guy on stage wearing a cowboy hat, and this cowboy is just screaming. He makes a point of beating up gay men.
And his loud justification to the audience is that these men are making a criminal choice. He is furiously angry at their choice.
But applying the cooties theory and the idea of projection we talked about, the author sees right through the hat. He argues that the cowboy likely has intense homosexual feelings that he is choosing every single day to violently deny. The anger comes from that internal struggle. The anger comes from the fact that he is working so incredibly hard to suppress something, and he sees these other men out there just living it freely.
Because if you truly had the cooties reaction to men, if you were genuinely biologically indifferent to them, you just wouldn't care what they were doing in their private lives.
The author makes this exact point about himself. He says, I don't feel any need to beat up gay people. In fact, he takes a very pragmatic, arguably selfish view. Hey, it leaves more females for me.
Supply and demand at work again.
And he also makes sure to note that he doesn't feel the sudden compulsion to wear a cowboy hat indoors.
Which is such a great callback to the plumage idea from the boobies. The cowboy hat is really just another form of lekking gear.
It absolutely is. He notes that at the Baker Beach Honeycombs, a cowboy hat actually works even better than a safari hat for attracting male attention. It's all drag. It's all just performance for the mate you want.
So we've moved from the beach to the elementary school playground to the daytime talk show. Now we reach the grand conclusion of his study. Section 7, the symbiotic relationship.
The author poses a really funny question to the reader. Shouldn't straight men thank gay men?
This goes right back to that desperate flocking theory.
The logic is mathematically simple for him. Since the best-looking, best-dressed, and wittiest guys, the wit wizards, turn out to be strictly interested in other men, straight women have a massive problem. Their pool of high-value mates is severely shrinking.
So they have absolutely no choice but to settle. To date, guys like him, broke, unfunded writers.
He is entirely banking on the desperation of the dating market. He explicitly states in the text that he fully supports a mass conversion to homosexuality.
Hoping to cause a great, desperate flocking of straight women toward broke writers. It's altruism born of pure, unadulterated selfishness.
But, he's a scientist, or at least playing one, so he knows he needs peer review before he publishes. He shows this very chapter to his housemates.
And the peer review process is, well, it's mixed.
They approved of the general stereotype that gay men are better looking and wittier. They liked that admission from straight guy. They basically said, okay, we'll take the compliment.
But then they got down to his specific data points.
Right. They completely gagged at his cultural references. Liberace, Elton John, Rock Hudson.
They practically told him, dude, your references are ancient history.
They brutally told him that his list is just a typical straight guy's idea of hip homosexual men.
Which is just such a burn. But it perfectly exposes that even though he's trying so hard to be complimentary and scientific, he is still looking at the culture from a massive distance. He doesn't actually know who is cool right now.
And the housemates challenge him on this. They say, well, if you want to know who is cooler than they are, you need to do more work. They tell him if he truly wants to understand why gay men steal the attention of every single woman he is trying to date, he'd better do some real, updated research.
And that sets up the final perfect line of the text.
He decides to continue the study. He decides he must conduct a scientific study of the people who put the homo back in Homo sapiens.
Out of pure self-interest, of course.
Always. Unfunded, but highly motivated.
So let's synthesize all of this. We have been on quite a journey today through this text.
We really have. We started all the way out with the blue-footed booby, a creature governed entirely by instinct. It builds a nest, it dances, it mates, it tears the nest down, it moves on. No politics, no shame, no daytime TV arguments.
And then we saw the direct human parallel. The sand fortresses at Baker Beach, the whistling. And we saw that the physical rituals are strikingly, undeniably similar.
Which heavily suggests that underneath our clothes and our complicated culture, we are all just biological entities driven by urges we absolutely did not choose. We are just animals lekking on the beach.
And that led us to the cooties theory. The core idea that orientation isn't a menu option you select, it's a visceral biological reaction. You don't choose to like Susie Plimpton. You don't choose to violently recoil from Billy. Your body just chooses for you.
And accepting that reframes the entire social conversation we have about this. If we view homophobia, like the angry cowboy hat guy, as a tragic struggle against one's own nature, and we view acceptance as simply acknowledging the wide variety of liking styles in the world suddenly becomes a lot less angry.
It just becomes a safari.
Exactly. A safari where we are all the specimens being observed.
I think that is the ultimate key takeaway here. The author put on a literal safari hat to distance himself, to observe them as the other. But he ended up realizing he was just another bird in the exact same flock, waddling his haunches and just hoping for a connection.
We are all just out here building elaborate sandcastles, hoping someone likes them before the tide comes in and washes them away.
So here is a final provocative thought for you to chew on as you go about your week. We've talked a lot today about taking a scientific approach to our social misunderstandings. How might viewing your own complex social behaviors, your dating apps, your gym selfies, your fashion choices, through the clinical lens of a bird watcher, reveal the absolute absurdity of your own life? If you stripped away all the language and the cultural justification and just watched the movement, what kind of bird would you be?
And the real question is, would you have blue feet?
Questions to ask yourself in the mirror tomorrow morning. Thanks for taking this deep dive with us.
Until next time.